Hi everyone, it's Kasia from Tarot Map, and this is another episode in Inspired Tarot Map series. And this time I'm hosting Enrique Enriquez. Hello, Enrique.
Hello, how are you? It's so nice to see you.
Thank you so much for agreeing to chat to me. I don't know if you know, but you were one of the you were like my Jesus Christ to some people, or, Olympic God that descended from the Olympus and changed my tarot life without even knowing that he's doing it.
Well, I'm really, really thankful for that. You're very generous.
Yeah, it was really like this. I even went, that's what I wanted to tell you. I went onto my blog that I used to write in Polish. And I wanted to check the date when it was. And it actually was 2015. And I remember, because I kind of met you through watching Tarology. And that's why I'm really grateful for this movie, because I heard also that a lot of people have changed their tarot reading style and kind of opened up their brains because of how you described tarot in this movie. So it was in 2015, I watched it and I went like, oh my God. And I didn't even like Tarot de Marseille before. I thought it was dry. It was kind of boring, no colors, no pictures, how do you read this thing? And, but I also felt very uncomfortable in Tarot world because I just wasn't fitting into the Ezo Tarot, into the predictive Tarot. And I was like searching for my own, place. So when I heard you talk, I really resonated. And that was like life-changing, tarot life-changing for me, because I just never read the same way since that time when I met you through this movie.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, so, for our viewers, because I'm pretty sure most of people know you, because when I mentioned that I might be talking to you before you even agreed, everybody was like, yes, please get Enrique, for an interview. I wanted to maybe introduce you via your attributes, that I kind of see you like an Olympic god to me. And I would go with black hat, cup of coffee, a pen, a notebook, and glasses probably, and I would probably call you like a man in black, because that's how I always, kind of see you stepping out of your flat, carrying the tarot cards somewhere, sitting in a cafe, writing and reading cards. That's how I always, in my kind of dream life see you. So could you tell us, Enrique, how did you start with tarot? How did you evolve? And how did you fail to be a regular tarot reader? How did you, how did you fail to do that, really? Because you didn't want to be a normal tarot reader.
Well, but I love the way you're saying it, and I never thought of it like that. But the idea of failing at something, and because I do think that failure is important, and failing is very important, especially in the context of cards and all these things that we do. I think that people always want to know if you're accurate, right? They want to know if you are exact, precise, all these things. And I think that is very important to fail. Every time that somebody has big expectations about me being accurate, I like to fail. And because if you throw an arrow to a target, then your entire life becomes about being accuracy. But if you throw the arrow without looking, then your world gets expanded. And I think that that's the whole point. So I think that the game was rigged for me because I never liked fortune tellers.
Yeah.
So I became this thing I didn't like, mainly because that's what this city, New York, was willing to accept from me. And I don't say that with regret. I actually say it with joy. I think that my life is an accumulation of choices that I never made or never choose. It's just the conversation that happened led me to where I am, and keeps leading me to a place which I don't know what it is. So yes, I do remember liking these cards and not liking what people said about them. So I would read these books, and I could never finish a tarot book because I just couldn't relate to what they were saying. And I understood at some point that I had to find my own language to talk about these images, but also that life pretty much consists on finding our own language to give account of our own experience. It doesn't matter if you work with cards or not. What the cards have that is it makes them an amazing tool to that is that the actual experience of dealing with them consists on seeing something. You see what is on the table, and then you have to name it. You have to give it a name. So you are training yourself in this act of finding your words to account for your experience. Then, of course, when you're used to do it, you don't need it. You don't really need the cards anymore. You're in the world, and the world is also some sort of visual experience like the tarot or poetic experience. But yeah, I remember I started working with the cards and searching and not finding whatever it is that I was looking for. I think that the main or the first clue that was useful to me with that was the idea of tarocchi appropriati, when I discovered that people use in the past, in the 1500s, they will use the cards to compose poems. They will give a card to a woman and then explain in a poetic form why that woman was the devil or the moon or the star. And I realized that there was something there that I could actually relate to. So I started mostly reading poetry and assuming that every single poem I read was a tarot reading. So the game consisted on trying to understand which card is being described in this poem. And also reading a lot about poetics, theory behind poetry. And on assuming that all those guys had written books about the tarot without knowing it. They were unconscious tarot scholars. So I think that the tarot brought me to poetry, but poetry made me a tarot reader. So it was like a symbiosis there.
So, but when you started, did you start straight away? Like, how did you start even? Did you buy yourself a tarot deck and you thought, oh, wow, I love those images and let me do something with them? Did you have any teachers, or like, how did you even, I can't, right now knowing you and knowing about your poetry and this kind of visual language that you use with tarot, like, I can't even like imagine myself, you at the beginning, how did you even...
I know, because it's hard. It's especially hard because sometimes you're chasing a longing, something that you intuit is there, but you don't know what it is. So it's a form that you haven't found your form, right? And you keep looking at, like, banging on a dark room, trying to find your way around. And I never had any teachers, and I think that the funny thing is that the only person that comes to mind, I went to study graphic design at this beautiful school, and there was this guy there. He was on one hand, I discovered the cards in a book about the history of printmaking. So I saw this, like the Knight of Swords and the Ace of Wands, all these things in a book. They weren't a deck. They were just images in a book, which I think is important, because I started by seeing these images as images and not as cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided, how can I get these images? And it turns out that yes, they come in a pack of cards, and the only place I could find those back in Caracas in the late 80s were botanicas, which are these places where people who practice Santeria go to buy weird things. They had all these bats but you also had like snakes coil on jars.
It's a magic place.
Yes, it's magic, and I loved going to those places and looking around. But again, you are completely a tourist because it's not part of anything that I practice, right? Yeah. But they were the only ones selling cards, and they will only sell you a Spanish deck of playing cards, la baraja española, nothing fancy, or the Tarot de Marseille. There were no options. There were no new age stores. There were no crystals and no nothing. So I grew up thinking that the tarot was the Tarot de Marseille. I never knew that there were others. And at the same time, there was this teacher, this professor at my school, that he taught the history of the book, and he looked at me and declared that he hated me. For the first time he looked at me, he decided he hated me. So he never spoke to me, and I never spoke to him, which turned out to be a beautiful relationship, because up to this day, I never exchanged a word with that guy. And it turns out that he used to read tarot cards. So this was a school full of beautiful women, and these women will talk about how they spend the entire afternoon in this guy's apartment looking at cards. So on one hand, I had these beautiful images, and on the other hand, I had this intuition that something wonderful, and maybe it wasn't even about the cards, was happening because of the cards. They were either the catalyst or the excuse for something. But also this idea of cards or the tarot as something that opens the door to some sort of privacy or intimacy, something that wasn't happening there and only existed at a public level in the form of a rumor. People talk about how they spend the afternoon with this guy looking at these things. And then something very peculiar happened, because 2 years ago or so, I was at the cafe, just exactly the way you described it. And this woman who used to go to the same school as me, and I hadn't seen in 30 years or more, she just showed up. She walked into my cafe and she said, like nothing, like if time never happened. And she said, I brought you something. And she gave me this, it was a catalog of a show, an exhibition that happened in Caracas in the 90s, of the entire collection of this professor. It turns out that he was a collector of tarot decks, and he had this entire collection of decks that he showed at a museum, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, at a serious museum. And she gave me this catalog that I never knew existed. And I read what he wrote about his own experience reading the cards. And I found a familiar voice, and that was interesting, because I still have no desire, no reason to talk to him. He's still alive. But I think that absence was more influential than many presences, right? In the same way that a failure could be that the way you inhabit a reality in a more active or fulfilling way than any success. So yeah, we're talking about things that are dear to me: failure, absence, and but yeah, at the same time, as I said, I understood. And then, I mean, I guess the way of saying it is this: I understood that the cards were or could be literally a bridge. The very if I lower these cards on a table, I will lower a bridge. And that was the way I found 20 years ago to connect to this city when I was just arrived, and I had no way to actually deal with the reality of the people in the city. So I think things can have a very simple development or explanation. I sat to read cards for people, but of course that it sounds great, but at the end, that means that you wait a lot. You spend a lot of time sitting, waiting. So at first I started filling that time by reading books, and then eventually I started writing. I will take notebooks and just write. And I will say I started writing or working on my notebooks as a way of killing time in between readings, right? But at the same time, all along, I had one idea that I found somewhere, and I don't even know where, or I don't remember, that somehow pulled me. It was like my landline or my lifeline. It was the language of the birds, this idea of a notion, a poetic notion that we understand, or as the language of the birds. So it was really hard to find anything about that, because the very few things you will actually find were really, again, esoteric inclined, and people will talk about angelic language or about things that had nothing to do with the very reality of the experience. So I had to somehow invent my own lineage, my own, I remember that something that was really important to me was to discover that André Breton, the surrealist, had written about the language of the birds. And I remember I spent 2 years tracking down an essay, because I found just a quote. And then to find the essay took me 2 years. And it was like this big accomplishment, and of course, all that kind of research is always so exciting. And then I realized, yes, this is a guy who was interested in this, and he even looked at cards. And in Nadia, in his very famous novel, you see the Tarot de Marseille and see the way he read the cards. So through Breton, I discovered Fulcanelli, the alchemist, and he spoke of the phonetic Kabbalah, and he spoke basically of a very simple idea, which is that when you describe what you're seeing, and you hear yourself describing it aloud, the form of those sounds not only says what you mean to say, but it may sound like something else. And all this bunch of crazy people thought that something else is the actual meaning of the things you're seeing, right? So I decided, okay, who else has played this game? And I moved back initially through French literary history, Raymond Roussel, Jean-Pierre Brisset.
Do you read French? You read French? Sorry,
No,
Enrique. No.
I can
Translated.
read it, but I can read it, but again, it's a struggle. It's not that, So in any case, I think that I always feel that somehow kept me sane, because reading cards is a hard business. I went to the doctor 2-3 years ago, and she told me that I have my earlobes, my eardrums full of scars. And she was very, very, taken by this, and said, it's so weird. I mean, I don't know why, but they are all full of scars. And I told her, yes, of course, they are full of bad news and problems. I have spent years and years listening to other people's problems. Of course, they are full of scars.
That's so funny.
That's what it is.
Yeah, you do need to have a special, I think, some special attributes to actually keep doing it, that not go crazy. But from what I've heard, and we've spoken before, because I also studied with you, and you never really wanted to be a tarot reader. I just find it fascinating that you have been doing it for the last 20 years. And I know how much you love the poetry of tarot, but actually it's really hard to, because your style is so unique, I think it must be quite lonely also, it's hard to kind of connect with probably too many people who think similarly to you, especially when the client base people, I think. Did you educate some of the clients, you think, because you wouldn't read like a normal reader, so would people come to you, did they know that, or did they just thought, oh, this guy?
Well, it's a mutual education, because lately, every time somebody says that readings, any kind of readings or fortune telling, is a dishonest business, I tell them they're right, but it's because the clients are dishonest, and it's not me. But you meet these people, and you tell them, I'm not going to predict the future. And I want you to know that I don't believe in that, or I'm not interested in that. That's not what this is. And they say yes, 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 yes. And then they call you the next day and they tell you everything you say came true. So that is like cheating. It's like if you tell somebody, do you love me? And they say yes, and then the next day say, no, I never loved you. It's the same. We came to an agreement, and then it turns out that you're humoring me. You weren't telling the truth.
Yeah. Yep.
So you have that. So eventually you have to accept that every person brings their own needs to the encounter. And some people need a prediction. Even if you're just juggling apples, they will see that as a prediction. Some people need advice. Some people need to be heard. Some people need just to vent. or just to think about what they are doing in a different way. So I have accepted first that they take of the encounter whatever it is that they are willing and able to take, and second, that is not my place to change anybody's mind about anything. So if they believe in angels, they come and go believing in angels. If they believe that I'm psychic, they would make, there's no way I can prove that I'm not, even if I tell them, you know. And there is a story that I always find amusing. When I was, because I started at a little coffee shop that is no longer open, and you can tell that I'm not a fortune teller because I went there on a Friday, the place was open. Then I went there on the next Monday, and it had closed forever.
And you didn't know.
And I didn't know. I didn't saw that coming. So you can tell exactly that I cannot predict anything, right? It was a big surprise for me. But after 20 years, they closed. And I spent there the last 5 years of their life. And one day, just at the very beginning, this very elegant man walked into the cafe and looked at me. And he asked me, "Who is the old lady?" And I told, "What old lady?" And he said, "The lady who passed the gift on to you." And I got really angry because I had to figure out the thing on my own. Nobody passed anything to me. So I told her, "There is no old lady." And he said, no, there is an old lady. I'm seeing her there. Of course, I was alone in my table. So again, they say, "No, there is no old lady." And we spent 10 minutes back and forth. Yes, there is. No, there is no old lady. Yes, there is an old lady. Until he just turned around and left, right? And okay, I forgot about it or whatever. So years later, I mentioned that to my father, and he told me, yes, that was my grandmother. And it turns out that my great-grandmother, which I remember when I was a kid, she was still alive. I only remember this very frail little lady sitting in a rocking chair, and there was this big armoire that was always closed. I mean, I don't even remember the room. It's like she's floating in the armchair and the armoire, right? And it turns out that that armoire was full with saints, and she used to read the cards. So when at some point she told my father, "When I die, I will pass the gift on to you." And my father, which is a complete skeptic, he told me, and I probably moved aside, and it hit you because I have no gift, right? And so I do find that amusing because I know that I had to go through figuring out on my own. That it's not that one day I had a dream and I knew how to read cards, or I saw a little lady who, touched me in the forehead. But I also have this other story, which to me only means that there are many stories or many ways to talk about something, and they are all as valuable, right? But yes, it's not. I mean, I accept the story as I accept the fact that I had to read a lot of books and discard a lot of books to understand where I was or what I was doing. And of course, talk to a lot of people, because at the end, when you want to talk like a bird, you go to the river, you sit and you listen, and the birds teach you how to talk like a bird. So you start by just doing what they are doing and trying to figure out how they are doing it. And I think that it's the other people who teach you how to be a tarot reader. They sit with you, they look at the cards, they notice things, they react, they ask you questions. And it's by doing it that you really learn how to do it.
Yeah, but that brings me to a question, actually, because I remember in this 2015 when you knocked over my tarot knowledge, and kind of, it was tower moment, an amazing tower moment, and I was rebuilding it in another world. I saw you, I think you were leading a class in New York, maybe it was, I think, when you were doing the, you were working with the body posture. So you were kind of leaving the cards. And I found it I just loved it as a woman, kind of inhabiting the body and bringing the cards and knowledge of the cards into the body, and actually from observation of the postures of the people. And you were doing all these different alphabet with your
Yes.
body. I was just like, oh my God, like, how did you even come to, like, you know, this whole idea? I found it so fascinating. I've never seen anybody do it with the cards. When I found the tarology and then started searching for any information on you online, I found this kind of, you know, bits and pieces here and there, here a photo or something. And I was just going, oh my God, like, how did you, because you taught this with the body, like, did it just come from your own practice with the cats that you started observing them and you're just going like, there are people and they do things and can I do them?
Well, yes, that's part of it. But also, I do have a relationship to art and to contemporary art, and I, from the very beginning, I felt that the 20th century in the visual art never really happened for the tarot world. I mean that the paradigms are very 19th century at best, and the aesthetics are so. But I knew about performance art. I knew about happenings. I knew about, I don't know, Vito Acconci, and I mean, I remember talking to Vito Acconci because his idea of making an artwork that consisted simply on following people on the street, which now will be very creepy, but at the time it was still possible. I understood what he was doing, and I mean, I understood it in terms of the cards. So I have always used all these other things that are in the world to help me think about the cards. And at some point you realize that presence is meaning. I mean, the very fact that you are there means something, and you have to, I guess, in time you discover or you understand that you have two choices. Either you acknowledge what that means, and the only way of doing that is to let the other person tell you. Everybody else tells you what you mean, and then you either amplify that, you say yes, I agree, or you try to erase it or to change it, right? You say no, I don't want to say that, I don't want to mean that. So the same thing happens with these images, right? You have all these people in the cards, and the I guess the something that is very interesting for me in terms of tarot is that it's always this tense relationship with language. We believe in language. I love words, but we are trapped in this cage of language in which we say only what we can name exists, only what we can talk about is real, only what we can say has a stance in the world. And then you have these images that are just there. And sometimes they can be so eloquent, even before you open your mouth. So I'm always negotiating that, right? And there is something that I find extraordinarily beautiful and I think that in that, the tarot is superior to any kind of poetry. And it's the fact that you can say anything you want about an image. And then you take the image and you put it like this, and all the words that were on top of the image just slide down. They are gone. They're not there. So you know that no matter what you say or how you say it, tomorrow you can say it better. And I think that that's extraordinary. That, you know, it's like you're never really done renaming these images. So yeah, I mean, it's, as I say, it was, I don't know, it was fun, it was exciting. It is, because I'm still trying to figure it out. It's exciting to try to understand how to deal with these images or with reality in your own terms, which a lot of times just has to do with accepting that the solution that the other person offers doesn't work for you.
Yeah, and I love
But
questions also, and I think you also appreciate a good question. I heard you also saying something that you're not really looking for answers anymore, like you're looking for good questions
yes,
and
yes,
a conversation, I guess, with, like, let's say if you were reading for somebody, just the conversation, and cards are like this mediator, like a bridge. But then your job of translation, and yeah, sometimes you're right, like when you open the mouth and you describe cards, it's already like
well,
limiting.
yes, and I guess in time what I realized is that I had to withdraw. So I have been withdrawing for years now, meaning that I try to move. You put that card there, you put an open form on the table or in front of the other, and you move back. You move back, and you leave the space empty so they can fill it. And they are the ones then to take charge and say, oh yes, I understand, because that is this and that and that. And in that moment, they are right. I mean, I'm not going to say, no, the tower means this and that. No, it is what you say it is, even if it's silly or strange.
Yeah.
And I think that is very important to, I mean, the ideal reading is a reading where the other person looks at the cards, they say yes with the head, and they leave. And no word is ever said, because that means that the cards did what they have to do, and that we were just the custodians of these images. And to me, going back to failure and absence and all those things that are the other option of what mainstream culture say we should want, to me, the time the cards spend in the pocket, in my pocket, is as important, even if not more important, than the time they spend outside on the table. Because when the cards are hidden, they are being recharged in a way. And I don't mean it in a psychic way. I'm just meaning that the mystery in the cards grows stronger. I always despair and makes me cringe when people want to put 3 decks on the same table and show you all the cards all the time. No, it's better to talk about them as something very special, very rare, very precious, that you may get to see or not, and only for a brief moment of time, because they are not any images. So the more you tease the other, or the more you subtract yourself, then when they appear, they are really so powerful and so strong. And then you take them away again and you put them in your pocket, because they are precious images. But that's our job. I mean, we are the custodians of those images.
I actually have these 2 quotations that I found in my blogs that I wrote in 2015. And I think maybe I found them somewhere at your website. The blog was in Polish, so I'm not sure anymore if it was, but that one was by Eliot, and it says that poetry can communicate before it is understood. And the other one is by Jodorowsky, that words are not the direct route, I guess, to experience something. And I think I've listened to your interview with Hermit's Lamp, or was it Hermit's Lamp? And you were saying something, with Andrew, and you said something which stuck with me, that, we experience the sunset without having the need to name it, or like put it into some kind of frames. And I think in some way what you were saying about the cards and the images, that sometimes, that's why I think I love that you did the body, the whole body thing, because you were kind of experiencing the images without really naming them.
And in a sense, you could just read the cards by imitating what they are doing, or even by making the other person doing what the cards are doing, and they will know what that means, because we all know what those positions or body postures mean, and we all know what our experience of our body in the world means. But yeah, I do feel that tension with language and with the way we name things, because everything is felt. And then, yes, we have to share that with others. So we say, well, it feels like this, or it feels like that. But we're, as translators, we are always somehow betraying the thing we are naming, because it may feel like that, but it's not that, right? So of course, at some point, you can even see language as some sort of separate reality from experience, and it's wonderful to be there, and it's wonderful to talk, and it's wonderful to read and to write, but experience happens elsewhere. And I think that the tarot has that ability of taking us there in a very direct way, even if you don't know anything about it, and even if you are not told that you're going to feel something or you're going to think something, you will. And that's extraordinary.
It's interesting sometimes, when you read for someone and you just describe the card, like what you see on the picture, and often you hear from people, oh, that feels like, and they don't say, I think it is, it feels like. Usually that's what comes out the mouth straight away. So they translate the image very quickly into the emotion, basically what awakens in them. But I think that's how you taught also. I don't know, you and teach probably I should say, because you still teach, Enrique, right? If people
Yes,
want to
yes,
study
yes.
with you, they can write, find you on
Yes,
Facebook
they
or
can find
write
me
you
on
an email.
Facebook and we talk. I only teach one-on-one,
Yeah.
and it's only by emails, because when you write, then you have the beautiful advantage of language ambiguity. So I like to write in a way that you have to reread that several times, and then you get more from it. If I just say it and you don't, and you find something ambiguous, you just move on.
Yeah.
So I like to correspond with people, and we talk about the cards, and we go through all these different exercises to extract meaning from the cards. But in a sense, I think that I mean, it's very hard. I don't know why, to accept our experience of what's happening, and especially for readers. And it's because we are trained, or we are taught to think about this in a different way. We are trained or taught to say, well, the reader is the person who speaks, and you speak a lot, and then the other person listens and goes home. And I think that a reader shouldn't be too in love with his own or her own voice. It's important to shut up, because as you were saying, the person, you have to say very little, and the way I see it, you just have to describe the images in a very literal way. And and this is perhaps one of the most important things I have learned, and is that what we call metaphor is almost like a reflex. Like when when the doctor hits you in the knee and you do that like this, it's the same. Anything we say, we express literally, will elicit a metaphor in the other. I mean, metaphor is a reaction. So we say, this is a man, this is the fool, and it's a man who is walking to towards this woman who is the empress, and she's sitting. A man walks towards a sitting woman, or a seated woman, and then there is the tower in which two people fall apart. And as soon as I say that, a man walks towards a woman, and then two people fall apart, the other person feels that. I'm just saying literally that, the way you will say there is a chair and there is a table. But the other person hears something else. And that's where they bring their needs to the equation. And then they hear what they need to hear. They hear whatever they need to hear in terms of their own reality. And I feel that way more valuable than trying to tell them, this means this means that, and this is what you should think, because that's the main problem. I think that the idea of metaphor, as we understand it, complicated things, because we really think that we have to create metaphors when we speak, and we don't have to do that. We only have to present the facts, and they create the metaphor, and they create their own metaphor without we prescribing anything. I do find that really important. It's not the way if you won't find that in any book, because all the books basically tell you what to think. But
memorize those meanings of the cards and then tell people, and then it's hard to connect them in the story and forget about the story actually. But that's why that's how I think, that's what I wanted to mention with how you taught me. It was this kind of describe what you see and how does it make you feel in some way to connect to the image. It was one of those very simple ways, but I think sometimes, it's so simple that it's like too simple, that our brain like wants to complicate it, because it's like, that's it, like that's what I say, the man is walking towards the woman and then there's two people falling down, that's it.
and I also, I have learned in time that we all approach things like the cards or anything for our own reasons. So I understand when people have no interest in what I'm saying, because I think that all in all, the tarot for me is just the means to acquire a malleable mind or a poetic mind, so you can be in the world and see poetry. I know that for a lot of people that is nonsense. I mean, why? And they want to know if they're going to marry or if they are going to get the right lottery numbers, whatever it is. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I just say I have no interest in that. That's not what I pursue. And and I'm doing my thing the way I think I should do it. At the same time, I do feel that more than being interested in the meaning of this or that card, I'm interested in the meaning of a person who stands with a pack of cards in the 21st world. Why? Why? What is the meaning of a tarot reader or a fortune teller in today's world? And I am more interested in that question, because going back to the idea of accuracy, we have a provider of accuracy in our pockets. We all carry our cell phones. And yes, and you can know if it's going to rain in the next 15 minutes, how much is gold today in South Africa. You know, anything you want to know, you will know in a second. So that can be the job of a tarot reader or of a fortune teller or oracle, or all those words which we have to somehow revisit and maybe get rid of. But so I think that the job is to provide and to, again, be custodians of ambiguity. What we give to people is ambiguity, is that space where you don't know where you stand, so you are more open to grab onto something, or to contemplate things in a different way. The space for stupefaction, which we hate because we don't want to feel stupefaction, we want to feel reassurance and certainty. But the possibility to live in within uncertainty, I think that is I mean, I had to do my yearly checkup with the doctor, and she told me something fascinating. She told me about the they can tell you the percentage of probability that you could have cancer in your cells. And then she said, and then it all depends of your level of tolerance to uncertainty. And I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, but do you want to know though?
Exactly. Well, but she said that's the problem. It's different for every person, because she could tell to someone, you only have a 10% chance that you may have cancer in your cells. And for some people will say 10%, that's nothing, and be happy. Some other people will say, I can't sleep. I need to know. And so she asked me, so how do you feel? Where do you feel you are at? And I told her, well, I think that uncertainty is a funny thing, because I may have 2% of chance of or cancer in my cells and being hit by a bus in my way down, So that means nothing really. I mean, we live in a constant state of uncertainty, and then we fool ourselves and we think, no, we have all this figured out. So that space where you can actually accept or even endure, if you can accept uncertainty, I think that's what the tarot reader provides. It's a space I wish, where you don't know if the person is joking or being serious, but you also have to figure that out.
Yeah. But that, I think, what's interesting with, I remember even, asking you at some point years ago, what books would you recommend for learning Tarot de Marseille and all of this stuff? And you, of course, recommended Italo Calvino. Yes.
Italo Calvino.
Italo Calvino, yeah, Italo Calvino. And I thought, that's it? What else? Like, I was just so hungry for, and of course, having this typical attitude of, if I'm starting something, like there was probably somebody before me who already went that way and they have to help me now. But usually, there is something which I experienced myself, that my reading style actually I didn't invent it. I didn't think of it. Oh, I'm going to read like this. Through doing it, it invented itself. And some things I use, some things I can't use, some things are just mine. And that's how I'm going to do it. But it evolved organically. I never really could have thought about it when I was starting. And in some way, this Italo Calvino was a wonderful example of like learning how to use tarot and actually use cards or use images to for readers, whatever, like to figure out your reading style, for people who don't read for others, just like to have the conversation with yourself, or let them just impress you in some way, one or another. And I found it's like really amazing that you like kind of like just giving me this book, you know, I was just going like, fuck. That's what you recommend me.
Yeah, but I remember many years ago, I bought a unicycle.
Yeah.
And then I tried to look for books on how to ride a unicycle, and I found a very slim book, which in itself is madness. You see, looking for a book to ride a unicycle, and the book was very slim, and the book just say you have to do it, no matter how much you read about how to ride a unicycle, you are not riding the unicycle. And it's the same. I mean, it doesn't matter how much you read about these things. I think that it's funny because I read every day. I read a lot, and I even question myself why you keep reading so many books. But I never. I mean, I have no patience anymore or tolerance to read tarot books. I can't. I simply can't. And it's because they are all the same book, and I already know what they say. And I'm not looking for the content. I'm looking for a form. But also, I think that going back to what you were saying, we are always looking for a familiar voice. We are looking for someone who somehow, even if they tell you something new, you feel like, yes, this is it. This is me, or this is what I have been looking for. And
Messiah.
of course, yes, well, or I found that again in the work of all these poets, right? And it's not that I agree with them all the time, but to give you an example, a friend of mine, Andrei Codrescu, is a very well-known poet, and from Romania. And I tend to believe anybody who comes from Romania. I think that if you come from the same place that the Dadaists came, you're probably right in anything you say. But so he introduced me once to some friends, and he said, "This is my friend. He's a soothsayer." So I knew the word, but still I took notice of it, and then I came back and I decided I'm gonna research this word, right? Soothsayer. And it turns out that yes, it's a synonym, or it's a word they use for diviner or fortune teller, but it actually means someone who tells the truth. And I appreciated that. I mean, how can you actually tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the only way is hard, right? But there are some truths you can say, and some truths you don't even understand, or truths that you cannot be said. But the only truth we can say is the truth of what we see. So again, if you see the fool, you see a man walking, well, that's what you see. The moment you start saying, well, that's the collective unconscious. No, it's not. That's not there. So it may be lovely, but it's not in the image. So be honest, just say what you see, and let the others decide if that is the collective unconscious, or their uncle, or just a longing they have for buying red meat. That's their
Yeah.
problem.
That's perfect. I love this because that came up like really clear, and like I think anybody can get this because this is fascinating. And that's why I think I was so in love with what you were teaching, because it's so bloody simple, but it's kind of hard to do because we wired differently these days. And I think we try to complicate everything. And for me, I think at some point, my advice also to people who were asking me how to learn tarot, I also would say, like, tarot is like life. So the more you know about life, the more you know about yourself, the more you know about learn this, and then you will know tarot better.
Of course, because most of what we say when we're reading the cards is not in the cards. It's in the question, which means it's in what we know about life. If somebody is asking about romance, and you see the fool, then you know that the guy is leaving her, you know. But it's not the same as if you are talking about, I don't know, being a veterinarian, and you see the guy with the dog or the cat, and say, well, yes, you're maybe not a very good veterinarian because the guy is there and you're not looking at, you know. And it's completely different. But we know what to say based on our experience of life, which is expressed in the other person's question. That's the context, and that's like a lens that we use to look at these images in the moment. And tomorrow the question will be different. Therefore, what we see in the cards will be different, because I do think that I like the tarot because to me it implies you have to live and stand on a paradox. And at one level, I think that asking questions to pieces of cardboard is insane. It's absurd. I mean, it's really, and the beauty of it is that it's a way of sabotaging reality. I mean, it's the least logical thing you can do when you have a problem is look at little images instead of going and doing whatever you need to do. But in any case, you have that, and the madness of it, but at the same time, there is a, yes, it's crazy to do it, but at the same time, it works sometimes, because the cards, I think the cards themselves are very suggestionable. We have been telling these poor little cards for centuries that they are an oracle, and they actually believe it. So when you put them out there, they actually act like an oracle, and they start speaking like if they know stuff, which is crazy, but they are there. So that is something so beautiful that again, I don't feel, personally, I like to experience mystery. I have no interest in explaining mystery or even understanding mystery. So when people start to tell me that that's quantum physics, I don't care, mainly because you probably don't know what quantum physics is anyway, but it doesn't matter. I think that the madness of the moment is extraordinary when you have these things that seem so on point, right? And of course, I think that has to do with the fact that we are the metaphysical realm. We human beings, we are the metaphysical in the world, and our job in this reality is to be metaphysical. We bring the metaphysics to the picture. So we bring the meaning, we bring that is not there. So the man who is just walking becomes the lover who is leaving you, or the bad veterinarian, or the crazy Buddha, or whatever it is that we want it to be. And so that sense of learning to exist or to inhabit a paradox, I think that's one of the main things you gain from it. Because the problem with science is that, you know, we tend to, a lot of people will say that science are red herrings. They lead you, you know, in the wrong direction. And I think that the problem is not that they can lead you astray or take you away from. The problem is that most of the time science keep you going in the same direction. You know, life is some sort of, or waking life is some sort of trance state, and then you have these convincers along the way, which are signs, and you say, yes, I'm wrong, I'm right, I should keep going, I'm right. And that's why our relationship to science should be very tense. We should always embrace and suspect at the same time of these things that we are given, because yes, it may be useful, but at the same time, maybe just that that's what we want to hear, you know.
But I think in some way, like, we probably will hear what we can hear at the moment, and we will see what we can see at this moment. But I think, as observed, as like asking the pieces of cardboard question is, it's basically like, you know, kind of looking into the mirror, because that's probably you're still going to take out of this.
Yes,
that's exactly, you know, because it happened many times to me as well, that like I get emails with feedback, and oh my God, like, you know, everything you said came true. And then I get examples of what came true, and I'm thinking, I would never say that. So I'm going back and listen to the video, because I actually do video recording. So I'm listening to the video and I'm thinking, I haven't said that, you know. I like specifically look for it. And I'm thinking, this is exactly what you were saying before, that like probably we are not even here to, I mean, these cards are not here to convince you, make you do this, or make you happen, like it will happen like this or not. People are totally impressionable on their way of probably their own development, or how they know each other, what they decide to do, because it's,
well, and that's another,
in this way it's absurd.
well, and that's another paradox, I think, because I do think that it's crazy to ask questions to cards, but at the same time the tarot speaks to the question. I mean,
and it's a conversation.
Yes, and if you don't have a question, the tarot is really speaking to no one. It's just rambling. So if you have the question, you more or less can kind of narrow down whatever is being said into something that you know what it is about. But I guess, again, I mean, I don't read the cards for people anymore. I never read the cards for myself. And most of the time when someone has an experience and then they want to use the cards, or how to deal with the experience or what to think about the experience, I think that the cards are a waste of time, because what we need from the cards is not the cards, is the poetic mind that the cards give us. And at some point, these events are happening, and they are the forms we need to read. We don't have to read these other images. It's like, for example, when people want to use cards to interpret a dream, say, no, read the dream if you need to read the dream. But those are the images you're playing with. You don't need other images.
But isn't it that the other images make you kind of, you know, even when you go, no, this is not about my dream, you know, like sometimes, like what I get, for example, because I read the cards for myself every day, but not in the sense of reading cards. I love art. So for me, this is impressions of the day and of myself, of my mood. Like, do I feel like this? And I'm mixing like, I think 700 cards, you know, together because I just love images. So isn't it in the way like reading the dream or not reading, or using images to read the dream, when you kind of go like, this image fit my dream, this doesn't, like,
you could be bouncing an image of the other, and I understand that. But what I mean is that I do feel that the experience of the cards is self-sufficient, and for that, I mean, on my personal level, that means that when I look at the cards, I get something which is just what it is. I find them beautiful, and I may see that there is this element, like I don't know, the La Papé's book becomes the water in that the star is pouring, and then I can spend an entire day thinking about what it means for a book to become water, or for memories to be malleable, or maybe just spill and let go, or become fluid again, which is the other. So I think about the implications of that, and that is enough. But then when you have this experience out there, for example, I remember 2-3 years ago, this woman wrote to me from a different country, and she told me, my son sees human shadows around house all the time, and now he was like this guy, now I forgot the name of he will walk with a lantern in his home during the day, trying to dispel the shadows, which is crazy for a poor kid. You know, he was 12 or something. So
like
she said,
exorcist, like an exorcist.
Who is this guy? This Greek philosopher, it's amazing, the name completely, the okay. Greek philosopher who walked around with a lantern saying that he was looking for an honest man.
Oh.
This was the same thing, only that in real life, and this poor guy was trying to, I guess, looking for an honest shadow. She told me, can you please read the cards for him? And I say, but why would we read the cards? We have to read the shadows. I mean, the images that are being presented to us are there. They are actually there. And of course, I'm here, you are there. I can't read the shadows. I can't really do anything. But which is also something that is important to me, is to understand your limits, because sometimes you have all this. I mean, now there is this whole entire tendency in which you buy a deck of cards that more or less here in the States is like $20. Maybe less, maybe more, depending. And that immediately turns you into a therapist. Yeah. So you touch the $20 deck and you become a therapist. And now you can dispense life advice and heal people. And it's terrifying, because at the end, we are just engaging in this little madness that is more a detour than any kind of main road. So in that case, it's the same. I had nothing to offer or to give for this kid who sees shadow, but more precisely, because I couldn't see the shadows, I had nothing to read, because that's the experience that you should honor. And again, we go back to giving dignity to what is in front of us, and the experience that deserve our attention were the shadows, not my cards. My cards are here, and you're actually looking at these shadows, so we should have pay attention to them.
So you wouldn't use the cards as the...
No, it's
like kind of connecting, because I don't know, because I'm not sure about time, I'm not sure about space. What if the cards could be the shadows, you know, in some physics, maybe, who knows? Like, I'm just curious how that could just like, okay, I'm reading you as shadows. If you decide, maybe that's the point. Maybe you have to decide this, and you're already there.
But I think what you're just saying is very beautiful, because the cards could be the shadows.
Mm.
It's absolutely beautiful. But I do feel that, first, this is a game of exceptions. Every single time you read the cards, that is an exception to all the readings that came before and all the readings that will come after that one. And but at the same time, I will say, if I have you in front of me like you are now, I'd rather talk to you than to look at the star in the tarot deck and talk to the star,
Mm.
because you are there, and you are there, and you deserve my attention, which is and that, I think, is the most important thing about the cards, is that they teach you to pay attention to what is in front of you.
Mm.
And in that sense, they also teach you to be indifferent, which is weird, and it's also paradoxical. But I think that the greatest attribute of anybody who deals with cards or oracles is indifference. You have
Mm.
to be indifferent to what you want, indifferent to what the other person wants, and indifferent to what things could be or could not be. And you're just there, and you dispense what you have in front of you. And again, that's the only truth you have. So that also removes this need to be right or please the other, then there's the other, which is to impress the other, which is crazy, but people
Mm-hmm.
also like that.
Yeah. I think that's important with especially for readers who read for other people, to come to a place within yourself that you realize when you're trying to impress and when you're trying to get somebody's attention, when you're trying to be right, because that's at some point becomes just unethical. And I think in a way you're really running this danger of cheating other person because of the ego, and how that kind of makes you, navigate. And because you can, and you're in this privileged position that usually people who come for a reading, depends on the clients, but a lot of them come when they traveled and when they actually do need a hearing ear for scars. And yeah, so I think it's, to be a good tarot reader, it's just, this requires just being a good human being, and just this personal evolution.
Yes. And that's very important, because again, when you say, what can I read to be a reader? Well, yeah, you can read Italo Calvino to understand how he used the cards, and everything you need to know about how to deal with cards is there. But I think that in truth, to be a reader of cards, you only need to be likable and to have a good imagination. I mean, if you can bullshit your way around the images, and then people like you, you will establish rapport, and you will have a great time. The problem for me is to assume that readings is the only thing that the cards are about, and that is the key for me, because I actually am doing my best to take the readings out of the equation, and then to understand the tarot as this experience that somehow becomes like the engine of a poetic mind, and what you get from that as a person is way more interesting and beautiful than an answer that the cards can give you in a half an hour that you spend with a reader. When the tarot becomes a daily practice or a life practice, something that you inhabit as it inhabits you, and then that the malleability of the very idea that it's a deck of cards and not a book. You know how many people have died because of a book, and because we are always told this is what the book says, black and white, page 27. But then you have the cards, and in the cards, everything is changing time, and you shuffle them, and by shuffling them, everything that you thought was the right order of anything changes and becomes new. So the I think that that's the greatest lesson of the cards happen even before you put the cards on the table, when you start mixing them, and then you have this thing which has four corners and is kind of square, and you turn it into a circle, and you realize, yes, we all start our lives when we are young and arrogant, with very sharp corners and a very clear idea of who we are and what we want. And then life is like that, like shuffling the deck. It erases our sharp corners. Life is like, you know, time will turn a brick into a very smooth stone. And it's the same. I mean, what life does to us is to erase our sharp corners. And that is contained in the very act of shuffling the cards. So you know that no image is permanent. And the image you put on the table now won't be the image that you're going to put on the table in 5 minutes and in a day and in a year. So it allows you to understand that the thing you see is what it is, but it could have been something else. And that implies almost a detachment from our own experience in that terms of what we want and what we should be, and it makes you happier.
But that's very very zen, right? Because there's a lot of like paradox in the sense in this, and then a lot of beauty in the simplicity of it. But the simplicity always comes back to it. The simplicity is just so, usually simplicity is just so paradoxical.
Yes, but also because we have this order vacui, you know, we hate the emptiness.
Yeah.
So what we do as human beings is that we throw language at the void. As soon as we see emptiness, we empty space, we throw language. We start putting definitions there and saying things too, because this emptiness make us uncomfortable. But of course, again, it's like I was talking to a friend of mine about shepherds, you know, Italian shepherds, and I say, I hope it will be great if we can learn to talk like an Italian shepherd, which he will say hi today and no next week, and in between there is nothing, you know, there's no not all these theories, and I'm having a harder and harder time being patient at cliches and at people who, you know, you talk to them and they respond to you with a quote by a philosopher or by a famous person, and I don't care what the famous person said because he's dead and he's not my friend, but I care about what you say. So what is what you say? And all that is also, it's that fear of silence. So because we're afraid of silence, we feel that with anything we got, you know, we just throw any kind of language we have at the experience. So of course, when we say, no, but shut up and look at the images, you don't have to say anything. It's very hard, but at the same time, it's very rewarding.
Yeah. Oh, I'm curious if I, just because, you know, I look at myself, I can't speak about anybody else, but this is kind of my living. I'm just curious how many clients I would have if they could just come to me and I would invite them for looking at images, even if I would love to do it. But I think I could introduce a little like session at the end of the reading when I would like to practice this, for example, and see how much people would get out of it. I'm just, you know, thinking now practicality, because just as I said, this is my living and I've got to pay my bills and do all this shit. But
I also made my living reading cards, so I understand. And I think that, you know, when you read a poem, you realize that there is a difference between the sentence and the line, right? And a sentence is a full statement that ends in a period, but a line is, in a sense, like a broken sentence, right? You have this openness at the end, and I think that we can do all these things I'm doing without the other person ever knowing we're doing them. I mean, we don't have to explain what we are doing, but it's almost an automatic process that if you just describe the cards, they will interject and say, yes, of course, that's like this and that. And then you have a conversation happening, and they never realize that reading is not like the other readings. I mean, some people may tell you, well, you're not like other people, and usually that they meant that as a compliment. They meant that they could actually talk to me in a kind of human way,
personal.
Yes, but I what I mean with this is that the end result in a reading may not be too different from any reading. It's just the language we're using, or the amount of language we're using. But for example, I will never tell the other person, tell me what this means to you, because that brings everything it makes it conscious, and then people gets paralyzed, right? Because if you tell somebody now speak, they freeze. But if you just allow for them to and then the inverse problem happens, that is sometimes they actually say things and we don't listen to them because we are the reader, we are the ones who are supposed to talk, right?
We know.
Yes, like a friend of mine who went to see a reader, and the reading took 2 hours, and she say at the end, I didn't know what she was saying. I was just agreeing with anything. I just wanted to be out of there, because it's of course exhausting, but I'm pretty sure that reader felt great. I know.
Yeah, probably. So I think we have to slowly wind up. It's 7:15. And I would like to ask you for that sample reading. After saying all of this, now I'm thinking, now we're going to read cards.
Sure.
But I would love to. I told you before that I pulled these 3 cards. I don't know, this morning at some point I thought, like, how is my conversation with Enrique going to play out? And I pulled 4 of Wands, 4 of Batons, and then I pulled the Ace of Coins and 5 of Coins. And I would love you to just maybe just do your magic with the cards. How would you, I would love,
Yes.
My idea is to just show people, not for you to interpret the cards, but to show people the way you connect the cards and how you sing the
Yes.
cards. So that's
Of
my intention, not to do any reading here.
I mean, yes, the first thing is we start with this 4 of Batons, and then we have an Ace of Coins and a 5 of Coins. But the beautiful thing about the pip cards is that they are numbers, and I don't mean that in a numerological way. I mean literally that they are a series of numbers that are moving either up or down. From 1 to 10, we have something that grows. From 10 to 1, something decreases in size. So we have this idea of things that either expand or contract. And if we know that, we can read reality, life, the sky, the ants on the ground as cards, because everything that is happening in our life is either in a state of expansion or contraction. A relationship, a job, our car, how many times, the life of our car, everything is either crystallizing or dissolving.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's interesting because we have a 4, we start with a 4 and we end with a 5, which is a very small growth, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, it's just from 4 to 5 is okay. In the middle, we have this 1 with this Ace, which means that at some point, everything contracts and then expands again. But something happens in that change. It's almost like a heart, right? It goes like this, it's pumping. But something happens in between the batons and the aces, and it's that we have 4 suits in a deck: batons, swords, coins, and cups. And we take 2 of those suits to be colder than the others. And that means, in this case, particularly the batons and the swords, we take them to be cold compared to the coins and the cups, for a simple reason. When we use a stick or when we use a sword, we keep people apart. So there is an antagonism, there is a coldness into it. But if we use a coin or a cup, they are not extensions of our arm, they actually are inside of our hand. So that implies that people have to come closer. So there is something immediately there that we see, right? Because we start with the batons and then we go to the coin. And it means that something that is distance becomes closer. But at the same time, we have this baton, this 4 of batons it's like an X, yeah, with 4 corners pointing into 4 different directions or possibilities. And then we see the center, and the center somehow telegraphs or starts suggesting the idea of that Ace of Coins that we see there, right? Because we see it in the even the very center of the 4 of batons is red. It's like a red diamond that is like the red diamond or the red center of the coin. So we have this idea of some sort of crossing of paths, that is called consolidates into this moment in which we are one. It's just one ace. But there is also something very nice that is happening around that ace, and it's that all the stiffness we see in the batons, which are just straight lines, becomes these beautiful rounded vines above and below the coin. So there is something stiff that becomes soft. There was something cold that becomes warm. Possibilities of moving in different directions consolidate in here and now, like that beautiful big coin that we have at the center, not only at the center of the card, but at the center of the three cards. And that's our conversation, right? We are making that coin. So then we see the coin again at the center of the five of coins, and it's now smaller because it's given space, allowing other four coins to enter the picture. So something that was cold has become warm by the consolidation of this reality we see in the ace of coins. And because we don't read the cards, but we read the question or the context in which we are, I would say that there is a before and after this ace, which is our interview, our conversation, our here and now. And there is a distance here, and then there is a closeness at the end. Cold has become warm, which to me suggests one conversation that leads to many. So the possibility of this dialogue we are having, not only to become more dialogues in the future, but also more people talking about these things because of this first conversation.
Beautiful. I love it. And I wanted to say also that, like, if you wanted to study with Enrique, as we mentioned before, I studied with you the pips. So if you're interested in Tarot de Marseille, of course, and reading the pip decks, write an email to Enrique or find him on Facebook. And I highly recommend it. I really learned a lot. Yeah. And especially because it's so practical, because you kind of have to write your own examples, write to Enrique, you have one-on-one contact with this amazing man. And yeah, I think, like, I've learned a lot. And I think since, as I said, I met you, and like, I just find you like such an amazing, like, fascinating person, and with such a good heart as well. Like, I don't know how to, maybe I just need this emotional connection as well. So I think you're very intellectual.
You're also
very
wonderful.
Thank you. Like you're very intellectual, very conceptual, and sometimes I love this too, because I love this abstract element and all of this amazing, intellectual ability. But I think if you didn't have that heart, sometimes it would be hard to connect, because it's,
sure,
not for everybody. Of course, you will have like other people who would just, love it. But I think for me, it would be really hard. But I just so appreciate that, you are a well-rounded human being who can come lower and higher. That depends with whom you talk. So this is beautiful.
No, but at the end, that's the business we are in as human beings. We have to all the time negotiate the distance between our heads and our feet. And yes, we need to feel the ground and, and do laundry and whatever that is, cook. And at the same time, we should fly a little, because
totally.
Life cannot only be doing dishes, but there is the dreams we have while we are doing dishes that are part of the experience too.
Yeah, totally. I also wanted to show this tarology book just for anybody who doesn't know it. To me, I love this book. Like, I haven't laughed so much when I was reading this book. I was just piecing myself laughing with all the rules and what a tarot reader is and not. And I just found it so hilarious. I think it's awesome.
I really appreciate that, not only because I actually like that book, even if it's weird that I say that. But you put things in the world and you always have this terror that after a few years you're going to hate them. So I'm relieved every time that somebody shows me a page of my book that I still agree with me.
Yeah.
But also I do think that book is really about the impossibility of reading the tarot. It's not about reading the tarot. It doesn't teach you how to read the tarot. It teaches you that it's impossible to read the tarot. And because it is impossible, we have to do it, right? and then because we are dealing with this thing that has no shape, no viability, and no logic, and at the same time is so solid in his form, is so viable, and is so logical, right?
Yeah.
So it's
and this paradox,
but again,
it's all that it's so amazing about life in general, I think. It's just fucking
Yeah.
paradox. It's just, that's just it. And this book is perfect as an example of it in general. It's like, yeah, it has all of it in it. And it just looks so cool too. And just the form, you like, I don't know, it's perfect. It's amazing.
Thank you.
book,
I love
so.
that you like it, because the book really means a lot to me.
Yeah, awesome. Enrique, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
this conversation, and I hope it's going to lead to more, because why not? We can always connect again at some point and discuss something, who knows what. Maybe I'll have some pressing question I need to ask you. And thanks so much for sharing so freely your knowledge and being my teacher, and I would really say probably friend, even though I know it's maybe a little bit far-reached, because we don't really, but virtual friend.
I of course you're my friend. I think of the people who work with me as friends, but also I think of people actually working with me, not as students. They are not, I'm not the teacher and you're the student. We are working together and trying to figure out this thing, which is so wonderful and so crazy at the same time. But it's a dialogue. It's really a conversation. And in that sense, it's horizontal. Yes.
Wonderful.
So of course, you're my friend, and I like your necklace very much.
Yeah, Labradorite. I don't know. I just felt like I want to put it on. It was lying in my bloody shelf for 2 years maybe. So today it came on. So I'm glad you liked it and that you noticed. I think it wanted to be seen today. So this is one of my favorite stones, by the way, just because it sparkles so well and it shape-shifts like life. And like tarot readings and like tarot meaning. So that's wonderful. Thanks, Enrique, in this way. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being here. And I'm going to stop recording now. Bye, everybody.